As you may have seen from the announcement, gentlemen, a new event is about to be released, along with 2 new permanent banners, Reena and Konoka. Should you pull and build them? Probably not. For the event guide, there is not much to farm. For the event shop, I recommend prioritizing only the gifts and artifacts, while skipping the discs and books, since the Wildhunt and Valkyrie factions are currently not in particularly high demand. If you do need those discs or books, you can simply purchase them through the Total Assault and Grand Assault instead, or you call them as Raid Shop. As for the furniture, it is entirely optional. They are not particularly rare, as you can obtain them through manufacturing if you get lucky. Or craft the selective furniture directly through TaylorMade, which requires 2 purple rarity furniture pieces. That leaves you needing only the amount of event currency shown on the screen. So, I recommend farming stage 9 first to avoid over farming event shop currency, while also giving yourself a chance to obtain plenty of Mandrake artifacts, if you're lucky. Once your event currency reaches the exact amount needed to purchase everything I mentioned, stop farming stage 9, and move on to stage 12 to farm the gacha box and obtain the Pyrex rewards. As for the gacha box, the rewards are randomly selected. However, once you obtain the Pyrex and at least 1 event currency reward, you can safely refresh the box and move on to the next one, leaving everything else behind. Those artifacts are not farmable elsewhere, but they can still be purchased from the JFD shop. They are not in particularly high demand either, but just in case you need them, don't hesitate to spend your JFD coins there. I'm mentioning this because there is always the possibility that a double drop campaign will be held alongside the event. If that happens, prioritize spending your AP on the double drop stages instead, such as normal, hard, commission, or scrimmage, whichever is currently active. If there isn't a double drop campaign running yet, you can continue farming stage 9, 10, and 11 for extra event currency, perhaps to buy the discs and books for absolutely no clear reason. And maybe continue farming the gacha box for more artifacts as well. But once double drops for normal, hard, or commission begin, switch your AP over to those instead after you've collected the shop resources I recommended, and refresh the gacha box once you've obtained the important rewards. That's about it. Now, moving on to the banners. If you are a casual player who mainly clears Torment or lower raid difficulties, then you probably will not use either of them nearly as often as competitive players chasing lunatic clears. Reena is a very important student for Drumbaka and Gregorius, while Konoka is unfortunately far too niche to see meaningful use in most raid content currently available. But let's take a look at what they actually do. Starting with Reena. She is a striker supporter whose X skill dispels 1 debuff, increases the selected ally's defense, and grants attack and critical damage to special students. At first glance, buffing the attack and critical damage of special students sounds impressive. However, because her X skill also includes a debuff dispel and a defense buff, the offensive buff values are noticeably lower than you might expect. So where is her X skill actually useful? Around half of the Gregorius lunatic clears currently use her as their primary striker support, since the team's main damage dealer is usually a special student. If you are a competitive player and happen to own S. Misaki, then Reena becomes a valuable choice for one team Gregorius lunatic clears, although she does require significant investment. For casual players however, she does not offer nearly as much value. I even tried using her against Jebura, but the results were less than convincing. In most situations, I would rather bring Siasuna or Isakurako instead. As for Drumbaka Lunatic, players are essentially throwing every student with a debuff dispel into the raid, since both phases require that mechanic. Her basic skill heals the ally with the lowest HP while also healing herself. It is a decent skill overall, and is usually enough to help keep your tank alive during Gregorius. Her enhanced skill increases max HP, while UE40 extends her buff duration. Since most players invest Reena to UE40, I assume that additional buff duration provides a meaningful improvement. Her sub-skill increases the critical damage of special students. Overall, Reena is designed specifically to support special DPS, and she performs that role very well. Against Gregorius, her X skill and sub skill provide excellent support for your special damage dealer, while her basic skill helps keep the tank alive throughout the fight. Against Drumbaka however, she is simply another source of debuff dispel. Whether in phase 1 or phase 2, that is essentially all you bring her for, as her special buffs rarely benefit the rest of the team. So while she is cute, and undeniably a tsundere waifu, she at least has enough practical value to help you clear raids like Gregorius, Drumbaka, and occasionally Jebura, even if she is not considered a core supporter. Now let's move on to Konoka. She is a tank whose X skill deals damage, and grants herself continuous healing whenever she takes damage while the skill is active. This self-healing mechanic is currently most useful against Drumbaka, where she can survive the boss's rapid attacks if you need another tank besides Kurumi. She does see relatively high usage in Lunatic, but for Torment and below, Kurumi is generally more than enough. Her basic skill applies a short duration taunt. Personally, I do not find this particularly useful since we already have plenty of reliable CC options. Sure, it has some value against Whack-A-Boat phase 1 and Hard, but if we compare the two directly, I think Kurumi offers both better CC and a stronger overall basic skill. Her enhanced skill increases the amount of healing she receives, allowing her to recover significantly more HP than most other tanks. At UE40, she also gains additional max HP, making her even more durable. Interestingly, around 82% of Drumbaka Lunatic clears user UE40 Konoka. That said, reaching UE40 is quite expensive, and could easily become a poor use of your resources. Her sub-skill activates while her X skill is active, increasing both her attack and defense. If she heals herself 25 times during that X skill, her next X skill cost is reduced by 2 at maximum level. The attack increase is honestly not very meaningful for a tank. The defense increase however, is excellent, since higher defense directly reduces incoming damage. As for the X cost reduction, it is almost impossible to trigger consistently in most raids. The only real exception at the moment is Drumbaka, whose rapid attacks allow her to heal enough times to activate the effect. So there you have it. Overall, these banners are highly specialized and primarily intended for Lunatic players, especially those focusing on Drumbaka. Among the two, Reena is definitely the more valuable student. Besides providing a debuff dispel, she also supports special students through both her X skill and sub skill, while helping keep your tank alive with her basic skill. Even so, this is still a skippable banner if you are a casual player aiming for Torment or lower. You are generally better off waiting for students who perform these roles more effectively, such as Kurumi, or perhaps a future Fest student that eventually replaces Reena as a striker supporter that supports special DPS. Build recommendations. If you do decide to build them for competitive purposes, here are my recommendations. For Reena, if your only goal is Drumbaka, maximize her level and gear, while 3 stars are already sufficient. Only invest in her basic skill and enhanced skill for better survivability. Her X skill and sub skill do not need to be maxed unless you are specifically using her to support a special DPS. If that is your plan, then maximize both of them. For Gregorius however, maximize everything. Her X skill, basic skill, enhanced skill, and sub skill should all be fully upgraded. UE40 is also highly recommended because the additional buff duration provides a noticeable improvement. As for Konoka, simply maximize her level, gear, and skills, and raise her to UE40 if you intend to use her. Just remember that these investments are aimed almost entirely at Lunatic players. If you mainly clear Torment or lower, they are generally not recommended. And that should be all. As always, Godspeed.